Chapter 27. She Walks Away. The rain in New York didn't wash things clean. It just turned the grit into a dark, slippery sludge. I sat in the back of the armored SUV, the silence between Alexander and me so thick it felt like it was stealing the oxygen from the cabin. Opposite us sat Dr. Eris Thorne, a man who looked like he had been preserved in salt and bitterness. He clutched his worn leather briefcase to his chest as if it contained the heartbeat of the city. Alexander's hand was on mine, his grip so tight his knuckles were white. He was staring out the window, his jaw set in that lethal, unreadable line. He was the man who had just stood on a fountain and told the world I was his partner, but right now, he looked like a man who was realizing he'd been living in a house of cards. "We're here," Eris whispered. We were in the basement level of the New York Academy of Medicine, a place of marble, dust, and the heavy scent of history. It was a far cry from the glass-and-steel perfection of Blackwood Tower. Here, the secrets didn't live on servers, they lived in boxes. "The journal is in a private safety deposit box in the sub-basement," Eris explained as we stepped out of the car. "Your father, Maya, he knew. He knew the Blackwoods were coming for him. He gave me the original sketches of the mapping algorithm. The ones he signed on the night the two of them celebrated their first breakthrough." We walked through the dim hallways, our footsteps echoing against the stone. Alexander didn't say a word. He was radiating a cold, focused energy that made the air around him vibrate. We reached a small, windowless room. Eris used a key that looked like it belonged in the 19th century. The heavy metal drawer slid open with a screech of rusted protest. Inside was a single, bound volume, its leather cracked, its pages yellowed. Eris handed it to me. I opened it. The first page was dated June 12, 1994. In my father's elegant, flowing script, the words were written. The breakthrough. "We saw the neural pathways connect tonight. Arthur Blackwood says we'll change the world. He calls us brothers." I turned the pages. I saw the sketches of the algorithm, the same core logic I had spent my life perfecting. And then, at the very end, I saw the second signature. Arthur Blackwood, sole proprietor. Below it, a note in my father's jagged, panicked handwriting. He tricked me. The signatures on the partnership agreement were forged. He has claimed the IP as his own. If I fight, he'll bankrupt me. God help my family. The room began to spin. The first surrender, the public protection, the locked-in contract, it all collapsed into a single, devastating truth. My father hadn't just been financially cornered. He had been systematically erased by the man whose son was currently holding my hand. "He knew," I whispered, the journal shaking in my fingers. "Your father didn't buy the company, Alexander. He stole it. He took the only thing my father had and used it to build your tower." I looked up at Alexander. He was staring at the journal, his eyes filled with a raw, agonizing horror. He reached out to touch the page, his fingers trembling. "I didn't know," he said, his voice a hollow, broken rasp. "I swear to you, Maya, I thought it was a fair acquisition. I thought the Sterling name was just part of the history." "He called him a brother," I cried, the tears finally breaking through. "And then he buried him. He made sure my father died broke and broken so you could sit in that office and own the room." I shoved the journal into his chest and backed away. The walls of the room felt like they were closing in. Every kiss we had shared, every promise he had made, felt like it was tainted by the ghost of his father's greed. Alexander POV. The world was ending. I held the journal in my hands, the weight of my father's sin pressing down on me until I could barely breathe. I looked at the signatures. I saw the jagged desperation in the handwriting of the man whose daughter I loved. I was the son of a thief. I looked at Maya. She was backed against the stone wall, her eyes filled with a look of betrayal that was more painful than any bullet. She wasn't looking at the man who loved her. She was looking at the heir to the monster who had ruined her life. Maya, I breathed, reaching out for her. Don't, she snapped, her voice like a whip. Don't touch me. I am not my father, Maya. I didn't do this. But you live in his house. You run his company. You use the same locked-in tactics he used. Don't you see, Alexander? It's in your blood. You don't know how to love something without owning it, because that's the only way a Blackwood knows how to exist. That's not true, I growled, the rage and the grief finally exploding. I gave you your freedom. I crossed out the clause. Because you realized you'd already won. You didn't need the contract anymore because you had me. She stepped toward me, her face flushed, her eyes blazing with a lethal clarity. You saved my father to feel like a hero, but you're just paying back a debt your father owed 30 years ago. It's not love, Alexander. It's restitution. The word hit me like a physical blow to the heart. Restitution. Was that what this was? Was I just trying to balance the scales of a life I hadn't even known was tilted? I love you, I said, my voice breaking. I don't give a damn about the company or the journal or the history. I just want you. I can't be with you, she whispered, the tears streaming down her face. Not like this. Every time I look at you, I'll see that journal. Every time I walk into that penthouse, I'll hear my father's ghost. I can't breathe in your world, Alexander. It's too heavy. She turned and walked out of the room. I didn't follow her. I couldn't move. I stood in the dim light of the sub-basement, holding the proof of my father's crimes, and realized that I had finally lost the only deal that mattered. I looked at Eris Thorne. The old man was watching me with a look of quiet, satisfied triumph. You got what you wanted, didn't you? I asked, my voice a hollow, terrifying sound. I wanted the truth, Eris said. The truth is a fire, Alexander. It burns everything away until only the bones are left. Now we see what kind of man you are when you're standing in the ashes. Maya POV. I walked through the rain. I didn't call an Uber. I didn't look for Russo. I just walked. The midnight blue suit was soaked, the silk clinging to my skin like a second skin I wanted to shed. The city lights were a blurred, colorful mess in my vision. I felt a freedom that was more painful than any captivity. I reached the St. Jude Clinic around 2:00 a.m. The night nurse looked at me with alarm, but I just pushed past her toward my father's room. I sat in the chair beside his bed and put my head on his mattress. I'm sorry, Dad, I whispered into the blankets. I didn't know. I let him in. I let the son of the man who broke you into my heart. I stayed there for hours, the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator the only sound in the room. I felt hollow. The fire of Act II had burned everything away, leaving only the cold, hard reality of the Sterling legacy. My phone buzzed in my pocket 100 times. Alexander, Marcus, the PR team. I didn't answer. I turned the phone off and threw it into the trash can. Around dawn, the door opened. I expected Alexander. I expected him to burst in with his security detail and his checkbook, ready to manage the situation. But it was Leo Mercer. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. He looked at me, then at my soaked suit, then at the look in my eyes. He didn't ask what happened. He just walked over and handed me a cup. You look like you've been through a war, Leo said softly. I have, and I think I lost. Did he hurt you? Leo's voice went sharp, his hand reaching for my shoulder. No, he is who he is. I took a sip of the coffee, the heat feeling like a shock to my system. Leo, I need to get my father out of here, not just out of this clinic, but out of New York. I need to go somewhere the Blackwood name doesn't reach. That's a tall order, Maya. He owns half the East Coast. Then we go to the other half, or another country. I have the patents now, I have the proof. I can build the Horizon project somewhere else. I don't need his money, I don't want it. Leo looked at me for a long time. I saw the hesitation in his eyes, but I also saw the old warmth. I have a contact in Zurich. A private research hospital. They've been asking about the mapping algorithm for months. If we leave today, I can get him on a medical transport by noon. Do it, I said. Alexander POV. I was back in the penthouse. I had been sitting in the library for 5 hours, staring at the journal. I hadn't changed my clothes. I hadn't drank. I hadn't moved. I looked at the Vigil of Justice statue. I finally understood why my father had bought it. It wasn't because he believed in justice. It was because he wanted to mock it. He wanted to sit in his glass tower and look at the scales and know that he was the one who tipped them. I felt a surge of rage so intense it was almost blinding. I stood up and grabbed the bronze statue, hurling it across the room. It hit the floor-to-ceiling glass with a sickening crack. The glass didn't shatter, it was reinforced, but a long, jagged spider web formed in the center of the pane. Sir. Marcus stood in the doorway, his face pale. Where is she? I demanded, my voice a low, terrifying growl. She's at the St. Jude Clinic, sir, but there's a problem. What problem? A private medical transport has been authorized. Destination, Zurich. The clearance was signed by Dr. Leo Mercer. I felt the air leave my lungs. Zurich. Mercer. She was walking away, not just from the tower, but from me. She was taking her father and her genius, and she was heading to the one place I couldn't reach her without causing an international incident. Get the car, I said, grabbing my blazer from the floor. Sir, if you go down there and try to stop her. I am not going to stop her. I shouted, the tears finally breaking through my voice. I'm going to tell her the truth. I'm going to tell her that I'll give it all back, every cent, every share. I'll burn the tower to the ground if it means she stays. She won't listen, Alexander, a voice said from the foyer. I turned. My mother was standing there, dressed in a sharp black suit, looking as cool and untouched as a block of marble. She looked at the cracked window, then at the journal on the desk. So? Eleanor said, her voice like a velvet-wrapped razor. You found the truth. I told Arthur that journal would be our undoing. He should have burned it 30 years ago. You knew. I walked toward her, my heart a hammer of rage. You knew the whole time. You knew our empire was built on a theft. I knew we were building a future, Eleanor said, not flinching. I knew that if we didn't take the sterling IP, someone else would have. I protected this family, Alexander. I protected you. By making me a part of a lie, by letting me fall in love with the daughter of the man we ruined. I grabbed her by the shoulders, my grip bruising. You're a monster, Mother. You're exactly the person Maya thinks I am. Maybe I am, but I'm a monster who still owns the company. And if you go after that girl now, you're not just a man in love, you're a traitor to the name. Then I'm a traitor, I hissed. I let go of her and walked toward the elevator. She's leaving, Alexander. Eleanor shouted after me. She's at the airport. You'll never make it. Maya POV. Teterboro Airport was a sea of gray fog and private jets. I stood on the tarmac, watching the medical team load my father's gurney into the back of the Swiss-bound Gulfstream. Leo was standing beside me, his hand on my arm. Are you sure about this, Maya? He asked. Once we take off, there's no coming back, not without a legal war that will last a decade. I'm sure, I said, though my heart felt like it was being ripped out of my chest. I looked back toward the entrance of the airfield. I expected to see a black SUV. I expected to see the steward coming to reclaim his prize. I expected a scene that would be the lead story on every news channel by morning. But there was nothing. Only the rain and the hum of the engines. I felt a sudden, sharp pang of disappointment. I had told him to leave me alone. I had told him he was a monster. But a part of me, the weak, foolish part that still loved him, had wanted him to fight for me. I wanted him to prove me wrong. I wanted him to show me that he was the man who could change the rules. "Maya, it's time," Leo said. I nodded. I started toward the stairs of the jet. "Maya, wait." I froze. I turned around. A car was screaming across the tarmac, weaving through the parked planes. It wasn't an SUV. It wasn't a Blackwood security vehicle. It was a beat-up yellow taxi. The cab slammed to a halt 20 yards away. The door flew open and Alexander Blackwood stepped out. He wasn't wearing his blazer. His white shirt was soaked, clinging to his chest. He looked wrecked. He looked human. "Alexander," I whispered. He ran toward me, his breath coming in jagged gasps. The security guards at the gate were running after him, but he didn't care. He didn't look at them. He only looked at me. He stopped 5 feet away, his chest heaving. He looked at the jet, then at my father's gurney, then at me. "Don't go," he said, his voice a raw, broken rasp. "I have to, Alexander. I can't stay in the shadow of your father." "I know, that's why I'm giving it to you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single, legal document. It was crumpled and wet, but I could see the Blackwood seal at the top. "I've just signed over the controlling interest of the Horizon project. To you, the patents, the funding, the tower, it's all yours, Maya. I've resigned as CEO. I've signed over my inheritance to the Sterling Trust." I stared at him, the world going silent. You did what?" "I'm not the man who owns the room anymore," he said, the tears finally breaking through. "I'm just a man, and I'm standing here in the rain, asking you to give me a chance to earn back the heart I never deserved." He stepped closer, his hands reaching out, but he didn't touch me. He just held them open, empty, and honest. "You're free, Maya, truly free. You can get on that plane and go to Zurich and never see me again. You have the money, you have the company, and you have the justice your father deserved." He looked at the jet, then back at me, his eyes filled with a devastating, absolute love. "But if you stay, I'll spend every day of the rest of my life proving to you that a Blackwood can be more than a thief. I'll be your partner, your advisor, your husband, whatever you need me to be." I looked at the document in his hand. I looked at the man standing in the rain, the man who had just dismantled his entire life to give me a choice. He wasn't the billionaire boss anymore. He wasn't the predator. He was the man who had surrendered everything. "Why?" I whispered. "Because the room isn't worth anything if you're not in it," he said. Maya POV. The jet engines were screaming, a constant, demanding roar. Leo was standing at the top of the stairs, watching me. I looked at Alexander. He looked like he was expecting me to leave. He looked like a man who had accepted his fate. I looked at the document. I thought about my father. I thought about the 30 years of lies. And then I looked at the way Alexander was watching me, with a look that said he would wait for me in the rain forever. I walked toward him. I didn't take the document. I didn't look at the jet. I walked straight into his arms and buried my face in his chest. He let out a sound, a sob of pure, unadulterated relief, and wrapped his arms around me so tightly I could barely breathe. He was shaking, his heart thudding against mine like a bird trying to escape a cage. "You stayed," he whispered into my hair. "I didn't stay for the company, Alexander," I said, pulling back to look at him. I stayed because I don't want to live in a world where you're not in the room. I reached up and kissed him, a long, deep, salty kiss that tasted of the rain and the truth. We're going to Zurich, I said. But we're going together. We're going to get my father settled. And then we're coming back. And we're going to build something that doesn't belong to the Blackwoods or the Sterlings. We're going to build something that belongs to us. Alexander looked at the jet, then at me, a slow, beautiful smile spreading across his face. Together. We walked toward the stairs of the jet, hand in hand. Leo looked at us as we approached. He saw the way Alexander was holding me, not as a prize and not as a possession, but as a partner. He nodded, a look of quiet respect in his eyes, and stepped aside to let us board. Alexander POV. I sat in the leather chair of the jet, watching the city disappear beneath the clouds. Maya was sitting beside me, her head on my shoulder, her hand in mine. In the back of the cabin, her father was resting, the medical team monitoring his vitals. I was no longer the CEO of Blackwood Industries. I had no inheritance. I had no tower. I had never been happier in my life. I looked at Maya, the sterling girl who had conquered the man who owned the room. She was the one in control now. She was the one who had the power. And as I leaned down to kiss her, I realized that the locked-in clause had finally been settled. We weren't locked in a cage. We were locked into a life. And for Alexander Blackwood, that was the best deal I'd ever made. Maya POV. The plane leveled out at 30,000 feet. I looked at the ring on my finger. It didn't look like a target anymore. It looked like a promise. I had walked away. I had found the truth. I had faced the fire. And in the end, I had found the man behind the mask. Alexander, I whispered. Yes. Don't ever get a taxi again. You're a terrible passenger. He laughed, a rich, warm sound that filled the cabin. Deal. Act II was over. The fire was out. Act III was fallout. And as we flew toward the sunrise, I realized that the fallout wasn't a tragedy. It was a new world, and I couldn't wait to see what we built in it. Next chapter, Chapter 28, he follows.